All right, guys. So I just thought I'd hop online and do a quick little video with the team. I'll get the team to say their names and who they are. Just having a bit of a chat. You know, a change of government means a change of face of the country. A lot of people have the perception. You know, growing up myself, I grew up in a very liberal household, and I thought, Liberals are good and Labor's bad for the economy, and they try to promote that through their media. Just to throw it out there, I'm politically atheist nowadays, and this video may, show you that. But I thought I'd sit with the team just with some common asked questions that you guys may be having, and asking out to the community of what impacts will happen under a Labor government to the property market. So I guess I'll just share with the team. If you want to do a quick introduction to yourself.
Hi, I'm Gemma. I'm from the Investor Relations team.
Pat.
Hey guys, Pat here.
I'm Charlie.
I'm Wayne.
And I'm Nathan. So today I thought I'd just brainstorm with the team just so we're all on the same page, with our thoughts and what it really means for a different government, because it's been about a decade since we just had the last batch of Labor guys in, whenever they backstabbed themselves and all that sort of stuff. But thought I'd share with you guys some questions straight from the team, my answers to them, my thoughts, and us to collaborate together. So who wants to go first?
Cool, I'll kick it off. So been talking to a few people today already, and general consensus is every time Labor gets in, we end up in a recession. Yeah. How's that going to impact the property market if that happens again?
Yeah, cool, good question. I always thought everyone goes back to the 1990s, and you got the Paul Keating era, right? And you go, okay, the recession we had to have. And I actually made note of this recently on some Facebook Lives about the fact that statement, I feel like he didn't even know what happened at the time, right? Paul Keating's got his, his hand on it, and he's like, it's a recession we had to have. It's the only thing that could come out of his mouth, right, at the time. But when you think about it, everyone goes, Paul Keating, he's insensitive and all these sorts of things, and he caused a massive recession. So we've really only had the Keating era in recent years. That's 30 years ago, and then we had the 2007 Kevin 07 sort of stint that was out there, and there was economic turmoil in both those occasions. But when we go back throughout history and we look at what happened in 1992, every country around the world actually had a stock market crash, had a recession in every country. So it wasn't just Australia that had a stock market crash or a property market crash or had interest rates go stupid. It was every single country. And I guess that just goes back to the fact that, we're more than just a country. We've got we're a worldwide economy, and all our economies are connected, where the money's being put into the system or taken out of the system. Jeremy, that's not here, he calls it the change of SIM card, right? And it's the players come and players go. But the reality of it is that, these things are bigger than any government, right? People think the government's going to save them. You've got to save yourself, right? The government doesn't have an impact. We go back and look at 2007, 2008, what happened? We had the GFC. Did Kevin Rudd or the Labor Party have any impact on the GFC? Absolutely not. What would they say is a common thing out there is that the Labor will just print heaps of money and give it as Centrelink to people, right? And you saw those $900, $750 or $900 checks that everybody got. Kevin Rudd gave the airdrop of money to everyone and said, here's $900, go spend it, stimulate the economy, buy a TV, whatever you want to buy. We've literally seen the most conservative government, which is the Liberal Party, in the last 2 years, print off $1 trillion in debt, right? So if we go back to the recession that we had to have allegedly in 1992 with Paul Keating, he created $96 billion worth of debt in a 5-year stint with him and Hawke in the government. What we've got now is $1 trillion worth of debt that was printed in 6 months, 10 times the amount. That was from a conservative Liberal government, right? So if we've got an economy that's so screwed up that the Liberal Party has to print off $1 trillion worth of debt to stave off a recession, right? We should have been in a depression. The only way they avoided it was by printing trillions of dollars and putting it out there. So technically we're already going into a recession. Are we in a bigger recession? I believe we're going to go into something crazy unless they keep printing, right? And my view on the government, just for everyone's knowledge on there, is that I don't care who's sitting at the table, right? They're only middle management. There's much higher levels of ruling powers, whether it be, we've got the World Economic Forum, we've got the WHO, we've got all these controlling parties that are so much bigger than a prime minister. You've got a prime minister, you've got one person removed from the whole political system in the government structure, but you've still got every single person in the policing, everyone in defence, you've got everyone in these places already. All you've got is a couple of people that appear as the voice of reason. They're not going to change anything, right? We're still going in the same course. So the fundamental reasons is that we've got a broken financial system. We're looking at the property aspect of all the financial markets. The whole financial system's screwed up anyway. So my own view is that we're going to see a lot more printing. We're going to see what has been occurring through the last few years just ramp up a lot more. And doesn't matter who you put there. It's going to put John Howard back there. It's going to snowball and roll everyone. So yeah.
What does that recession mean for existing property owners?
Recession means different thing for everyone, I guess, Gemma. Looking at a recession, it's a downturn in the economy. People may not spend money on TVs or new cars or anything like that. And they're trying to create a global recession, a very small one, to try and stop hyperinflation, right? We're seeing massive inflation everywhere. They're reporting that we've got 5.5% or 5.1% inflation, but what has gone up less than 5.1% in the last 2 years is nothing, right? Everything's gone up more, whether it be our phone, whether it be our electricity bills, whether it be our petrol, whether it be whatever. They've got to try and stop that. So what they've got to do is take money out of the system, which will cause a massive recession, meaning that people don't have money to spend on day-to-day things. So they will cut back on going out to the grocery, going out to the movies. They'll cut back on buying a new fridge or buying a new phone, and then the shops will suffer, and it will cause an economic downturn, and they'll have to cut staff and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's what a recession is on that front. But there's opportunities with inside that. I wish the whole market would crash, right? There'd be opportunities for us to pick up shit cheaper. If the market crashes, it means that they're going to have to put interest rates down, which will prop up the economy. They've got to do things to stimulate the economy. And beforehand, they just do little things and it stimulates the economy. But now they have to throw the whole kitchen sink to stimulate the economy.
What about climate change? Being kind of part of the policy for Labor as well.
That's a good question, Pat.
So what do you think they'll implement in terms of climate change, and how will it impact the market?
Good question. I'm actually going to go back to the last question and tie that in a little bit as well. But one thing that concerns me, and I've talked about this a lot for the last 12 months, is that we've had a health crisis, right? And everyone's had to go and get themselves a little juice-a-rooney. But now we're heading into a different phase of that, which is a climate crisis, right? Everyone's saying I need the uproar, but this could be a bit deep for a lot of people. But there's a thing called cloud seeding, right? I don't know if everyone's aware of that, but there's a thing called cloud seeding, so it's very strange. But just Google it, go and research. It's actually documents from the government. It's been introduced since the 1960s, where you can actually cloud seed and make clouds and rain occur where they wouldn't naturally from gases and whatnot. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to go into that. But reality is that when I see fires, I think they could put a fire out by putting a rain cloud over the top of the fire and putting it out, etc. At the moment, we've got a lot of floods, we've got a lot of things that are going on, and I believe, from just personal feeling, at the agendas, if you go and look at Agenda 2021 and Agenda 2030, you'll start seeing that they'll have energy issues and they'll try and convert everyone to electric cars and all this. I talked about it way before we're starting to see it at the moment. It's just interesting that it's out there, so I literally put on the record. There'll be stimulus packages to upgrade people's cars. So you throw away your old dirty petrol car and you get a new shiny electric vehicle and you'll get $1,000. We'll pay half that car for you. And everyone's like, yeah, I'll get you a brand new car, I'll get electric, it's not going to cost me anything. I'm doing the right thing for the government, right? For the country and for the climate. But the reality of it is that these cars now control where you go, right? They're connected to micro credits, which come through from a social credit system that's going to be installed when the economy crashes, and lots of things that are tied into that market. So I believe in this environment where they're trying to push climate action, there'll be certain incentives that will be put out there. Incentives as far as getting electric vehicles, getting solar panels on your home, getting water-saving devices, And if you go and look at where money is turning into, it's a thing called an ESG, which is the environmental social governance, which is a new way that they're basing money on. So if you do certain things that are good for the environment or for certain things, your business will get funding for that. So you get a little tick and you get some money for doing so, just like grants and JobKeeper and all those sort of things that come out. But they're going to make more stimulus packages that are based around green energy to encourage people to spend on these types of industries. So I think there'll be a lot of money on that. Also, just looking back and tying it back to the other question about every time the economy, you've got labour in, there's a problem. Some people did really well out of 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. A lot of people were screwed at that time. But if you go back through that period, the Sydney property market, for example, crashed between 2003 and 2007. It found a bottom in 2007-8. And then with all the stimulus packages that Kevin Rudd was putting out, first home owner grants was a 14,000 first home owner grant, right? You could just literally go and buy a house for 200 grand. They were very common back then. You've got the stamp duty exemption, plus you've got 14 grand cash. You get a house for next to nothing. And it could have been any property, not a new one. There was so many grants and packages. That was the start of the property boom in Sydney back in 2008, 9 and 10. Took us into the boom that we just saw. But most importantly, there was something I think everyone's forgotten about, and that's the resource boom, right? We had a mining boom back in 2007, 8, 9, 10, and we saw some of the biggest economic growth in this country had ever seen in that period of time. So I think that there will be stimulus packages surrounding green energy deals, right? And you look at Barnaby Joyce, he's pissed, right? That guy loves coal, right? His fucking hands are probably black from, playing with it all day. That's the coal, that is, not himself. Politicians, who knows? But the reality is that what sort of deals are being done? So I've seen that there's green energy fuel points, so they'll need hydrogen power stations along freeways. Strategically enough, we've actually owned motels all along these freeways that they're talking about, interestingly. But there's opportunities there as they go and upgrade roads and put the networks in the infrastructure. If we look at places like Gladstone that we've talked about, I've got a couple of motels there, we've got lots of client support stuff there. That market was crazy high, went down, and we picked up right at the bottom. Now the market's gone up a lot, but there's just a $1 billion, 100 billion, whatever it is, like the hydrogen plant that's going in. I think we're going to see a lot of hydrogen plants, solar farms, new energy sort of resource sectors, and these things will be grants to old towns that had coal, and they're going to try and transition to. So as we see this infrastructure get put in, it's going to cause lots of booms. That's my view. So it's not all bad. You've got to work with what you've got, and I've always said everyone should have a recession-proof property portfolio. There's going to be people that are going to get screwed. And it's not because of anything Labor's going to do. They will look like the fall guy. I'm sure that they will, right? We've already seen that we've gone into an economic tightening cycle. We've seen interest rates start to rise before the election. We've seen certain things occur. I just think it's just part of the season. We're going to roll with it. We saw a recession in the Sydney property market since 2019, from about 2017 to 2019. And when we saw, the period we've just been through with the illness that's been going around, and we've seen lots of stimulus packages, dropping of interest rates and certain things to starve off that, we saw the market crash, but it was only a 2-year period, and the market's done the biggest boom ever. We've got places that have doubled and tripled in the last 2 years. So if you've got a year of pain, 2 years of pain, 3 years of pain, that's the opportunity to go and find things that are very cheap, and the opportunity lays in there. So that's my thoughts on that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
With Labor now in, last time they were in, they tended to raise the taxes.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to raise taxes again and
they've got to
affect our spending?
Yeah, I forget the song. It was a really funny jingle that they had with the Liberal Party. I forget what it was the other day. It was about taxes, right? And they've got a reputation for raising taxes and, robbing Peter to give to Paul, right? And generally from people that are trying to get ahead, and they'll give to people that don't do so much for society. And that's the mindset behind it. However, if we look at that and go, okay, that's just a thought or an opinion because it's typical Labor stuff. If we look back at the typical Liberal stuff, we've just seen Liberal just be total socialists and print off money for everyone. in the last few years. So I think that the powers to be are much greater than the Labor Party or Liberal Party. Like, we've got an economy that's dying. We've got a world which is definitely changing with powers to be that are influencing certain things. So do I think that they're going to increase taxes? They could, but I don't think they will, because if they increase taxes, it's going to cause even a greater burden to the household. I think it's important that everybody be diligent. A government can come in for 3 months. How many times did we see like a rud, a gill-eyed, a swan? Back in the old days, they shoot each other in the back every 6 months. These politicians might be here today and gone tomorrow, but your investment policy should never change, right? You should be protecting yourself. So a lot of people might be thinking, I'm earning money, I'm going to pay more taxes. Well, for me, I hate money. I just want to go and buy assets that are going to give me more cash flow. The problem with, I think, 70% or 80% of Australians is that they're getting net cash flow every week from their job, and it's easier for the government to put their hand into that tax and take your money out before you get it. Whereas I think that it's important, if you're an investor or if you're a business owner or whatever, you can control that cash flow, and you can go, well, I'll pay the tax man over here when I feel like it, and I can have greater ways to offset and minimise that tax. So I think, some people should be nervous about it because they're probably, partying like it's 1999, but having a sound investment strategy in place is very important. So, the fundamentals never change, right? 20 years of investing almost, fucking getting old. I probably started investing before Charlie was born, almost. But it's something that the fundamentals are very, I've never changed my investing strategy throughout, 20 years of investing. It's very much fundamental throughout all markets. It's important to build a recession-proof property portfolio, to have a business which is not exposed to changing markets, and if those markets do change, that you do have the ability and the mindset and the thoughtfulness to be fluid with those markets as well. So just my thoughts.
Does the government that's in place at the time affect your portfolio at all?
No. Sometimes they can, very marginally, but the way that I see it, like, we've got the alleged incoming government giving out comments like, we're going to give 5% extra wages, for example, right, from the minimum wage. What that will do will create even more cash flow issues, right? So if we've got a government, and the thing that I've already seen from the promises that are being put out there is that we will print more money for minimum wages, we will do certain things. Now imagine if a business is paying, let's say, a takeaway shop or a retail shop or whatever, if those wages, let's say there's a margin of 5% there, and if wages are going up by 5%, right, and it's 50% of their expense bill, that means that they could be losing 2.5%, or half their weight, or half their profits have gone. That's going to cause a massive issue for those businesses. So if the businesses are now having to pay more from their bottom line, they're going to want to keep their profits there, they're going to be jacking up their prices, right? So if they have to pay more because they're being forced to pay more in the wages, that would mean that they will have to pass that cost on, which would mean the cost of living will go up even further, and will expedite that inflationary cycle.
Does rents go up or down with that?
Well, if we go back throughout history, my biggest rental booms that I've ever seen were through the Kevin 07 era, right? Back in 2007, 8, 9, rents had not gone up for 7 or 8 years. But then when Rudd got in, rents went up $50, $80, $100 a week in the affordable areas, right? In the top end of town, whatever happens, it happens there. But the affordable areas, they got dragged up because there's more money, right? And the reason why we've seen so much cost of goods rising in the last few years isn't because Bitcoin's so great, or it's not because the Big Mac's better than what it was 2 years before, and it's probably worse with more chemicals, more shit in it, and the staff probably got worse conditions and worse lifestyles. But what has happened is that people have been given more money, free money that was printed by the government, being $1 trillion of debt, and now this new government has to manage that $1 trillion worth of debt and then also keep the economy afloat. I watched when they did their speeches, the Scammo and Sleazy, when Albert Sleazy came up and he gave his speech, and when Scammo handed over and conceded defeat, I actually looked at his face rather than reading his body language. He was like, okay, I'm going to resign, I'm going to step back and all this sort of stuff. It was like, this is going to fucking blow, right? This system's going to blow, right? And it's like he's happy to hand it over because it's not on his clock. So I think from an economic challenge, there's so many challenges there. They have no option but just to print more money. And as they print more money, that's going to find a home. If cost of living goes up, then everything rises. So if you've got assets already and those rents are rising, well then you've got your loan locked in, you've got your purchase price locked in. It means that those loans, that the rents will just be extra cash flow coming in each week. So it's time will tell. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited to see what happens from it. And I don't think it's really going to affect me or our investors much, but a lot of people are scared about it. So it's important to look at. Do you have any other questions?
I've got property in super.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with this 40%?
Yeah.
You can pull 40% out. Is that for first home buyers? Or?
Yeah. So there's lots of grey areas around it, and it has terms and conditions that haven't been released yet.
Yeah.
But I find it very interesting, right? And this could be one of the most exciting things from this government to blow up our Ponzi scheme and go into the next level of hyperinflation. If that was to go into an act, so basically what my understanding is that if you're a first home buyer, you can take up to 40% of your super out, up to $50,000. So if someone had 120 grand in their super, they could probably take out about 50 grand with their super and use that as a deposit and closing costs for their first property. So if someone doesn't have a property and they have 100 grand, they can pull out 50K out of that and go and buy themselves a house. Now, that will have an impact into the future when those people go to retire, but for the moment, it will mean they've got 50K in their pocket, extra to spend in the market that they didn't have to start off with. And it makes me actually go back and think about why did super get introduced, right? We were talking beforehand about the recession we had to have in the 1990s and 92, all these things happened. But if you notice that what came out the other side of 92 was there was no super beforehand. So they installed super, right? What did super really do, right? Super created liquidity from everybody having to chuck in 10% of their income or 9% of their income into buying stocks, shares, bonds and whatever. So we had a recession, the whole stock market blew up in the 90s, late 80s. And their recovery plan, which is a global orchestrated thing that happened, right? It's not just a whole world government organization here right now. You had, these 401k, which is the US version of the super fund, whatever. These guys created, every country had their super fund market get created. And what did that super fund do? That created liquidity for people to prop up, just the average everyday people, to buy up shares and create liquidity for the stock markets around the world and for creating bonds. So for us to start a new market of trading bonds internationally. So for them to propose to rape and pillage the super fund, I believe that something has to be created for us to go through the next cycle of the property market. Unless people's wages are going to double, which they will go up a fair bit, but then as will the cost of living and the cost of cheeseburgers and haircuts and iPhones and whatever. There's something else needs to happen. So they've given away no deposits beforehand. They've given away stamp duty exemptions. You got to ask someone that's buying a property in 1990. They'll be like, I never got a first home in a grand. I never got this. I never got that. I never got the next thing. But they got cheaper prices. So this bubble is just getting bigger and bigger. Them throwing in an extra 50K, like that was the Liberal one actually. But then we've now got the Labor coming in with their we will buy 40% of your home, right? So basically what the government is saying is just like the super fund situation, we're going to create a new product, right? A bond, right? Where's the government getting their money from? They don't print the money, they don't make the money. They're creating bonds and then they're selling them off as AAA rated bonds or whatever to different countries, and their central banks are printing out money to buy these things up, which gives liquidity, which means that the government is now co-owning 40% of your home, up to 40% of your home. So one option was the Liberal one. The one option now is the Labor one. If people are taking this up, this means that people don't need a deposit, right? You just go and get a 60% loan to cover your share, and then the government puts in their 40%, and you've got a very small loan, it means the government's paying for their debt. They're not paying 4% interest on that. They're getting the debt at 25 basis points, 35 basis points, 55 basis points, whatever the interest rate is what they're paying for their bond. So that means that the government can get in and own a chunk of new people's houses whilst increasing an inflated bubble here, right? So if anything, Labor's policy could make it harder for people to get into a home, right? And goes back to that you'll own nothing and be happy, right? This is the perfect stand-up guy, right? They've got some fucking Dumbo out there going, whatever. So the super, if they took people's supers, that's an option still, like it's a Liberal Party policy, but we're seeing everything that's out there, which is Liberal Party today, that Labor's having to do. They could put their own spin on it. They could do anything with it. But if they take 40% of your ownership, that means that that's going to create a whole pile of new people that couldn't afford ownership beforehand, partnering with the government. The government owns a big chunk of your property. You have no control over it. Like even looking at it now, you really don't have control over it, because if you don't pay your taxes and you don't put a council approval in, you're soon get yourself in a lot of trouble. But that, I think, will be pouring rocket fuel on an inflationary market as it is, which will be fun to see. So I don't know, but it's not a bad idea. It's a bad idea for those that don't have the assets, because it's going to keep dragging the prices up and inflate things away, just like it did with tapping into people's supers in the early 90s by inflating that stock market and getting it back to all new time highs. So, yeah. Charlie?
Well, like Labor's been known to increase interest rates. What does that mean for people who want to buy their first investment property or grow their portfolio?
It's a good one. Interest rates, a lot of people think interest rates are controlled from the party and think, Labor will push the rates up because their parents at 1990 or whatever, they remembered interest rates at 20% when the Labor government was in. But the reality is that the government has no control over interest rates, right? We just saw in an election campaign the interest rates go up, right? If anyone had control on it, the Liberal Party would be like, no, please don't, right? They'll be crying in the corner. And that could be seen to a lot as a nail in the coffin, right? But I don't see it. We have government. Everyone thinks that government, have gone out and they voted. They've got the sausage sizzle, and they're going like, we're going to get rid of Scamo. We're going to get rid of Labor. We're going to do whatever. You're going to vote for an independent. But reality is that that's what people's belief system is. There's a whole pile more infrastructure that's above that. And the Central Bank of Australia, the RBA, is way above that. And they control the liquidity in the system and the money. If you control the money of the people, you control the whole system. So it's not really a Labor issue to be able to control if they want to put interest rates up or not. So I believe that we will see interest rates go up, whether it's another 0.25%, another 0.5%, another 0.75%, but there's only a cap to how high interest rates can go. Back in the 90s, when the interest rate went up from 10% to 20%, house prices were 100 grand. So 10% of 100 grand is 10 grand. However, if you look at 1% of $1 million now, that's still 10 grand, right? So 1% interest rate increase will do what a 10% interest rate increase would have done back in the day. I think that monetary policy around the world, and we're starting to see it with, it's getting too deep for everyone, but the yield curves, which is the bonds, which is where they trade the money at, the yield curves are inverting at the moment, and that's a big signal for a recession. And generally within about 12 to 24 months, you'll see stimulus packages come out and you'll see monetary policy change course. So I believe on our clock, we will see interest rates go up, but it's got nothing to do with Labor, but we'll also see them come down to levels which we've never seen beforehand, lower than whatever. So everyone's fearful of interest rates going up. I still believe that we'll see interest rates go negative, and probably in this term of government. So, that's my thoughts on that. Yeah. Any other questions?
What are Labor's main policies, and what should people know about them if they're getting into property themselves?
Yeah, good question. There was a couple of policies I've been looking at just in the news and just trying to sift through, where the left blows are going to come from, the left hook. But it appears to me that there's some set agendas and some fluff around their policies. Looking at the task that's ahead for them, they've got to keep the economy travelling good, right? We've got record unemployment, 3.9% unemployment. You can't really go lower than that, right? So they've got a big job to keep the unemployment level at that rate, as well as not go into a massive recession, as well as being able to provide all these things that promised. So I think that we're going to see more inflation. Everything they've talked about has indicated more inflation. So whether they make hydrogen plants, that means they have to go and borrow the money to go and make these things happen. Whether they create and force 5% increase to wages and to the minimum wage, that will push inflation up because the businesses will have to recoup that. They want to give energy grants. They want to make universal healthcare. So there's all this money that's being printed for healthcare and these slush funds for revenue. It's interesting because they keep talking about universal this, universal that, universal education. It's like, I thought we were Australia, like universal would indicate the universe, right? But these talks of universal education, universal healthcare, etc., are interesting because I believe that there will be outside key players that will have to contribute to this, whether it be the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Looking at their policies, everything they've said has been very much towards inflationary pressure to the market. So time will tell, but once again, like the day has changed, you've got a different actor that's there. And if you look at all these politicians, they read from a script, right? They look into a teleprompter, right? They've got a set of questions and agenda that they don't steer off, especially this guy, because what I understand from seeing some of these things is that he just talks shit and doesn't know the answers and walks off. But whenever I see someone that's reading off a script, I think, well, an actor reads from a script as well, right? And this is just the act that we've got today to present to us our case. The agendas are there, they're being pushed. I don't think that we're going to see anything different than what we've already seen for the last 2 years specifically, because things are ramping up now. And just my thoughts on it.
Interesting.
John?
Okay. First of all, you've talked about the act and the agenda and the fluffiness.
Yeah.
Would you argue that Albanese is a puppet for the new world order?
Good question, right? When we look at definition of a puppet, right? A puppet is someone that's got like a hand inside a puppet, right? Or someone with a string on a puppet, right? If you had two hands, you could have Liberal and Labor, or left and right, whatever that may be, right? So when we look at these puppets, how many times have we seen them removed from within their own party? They say something a bit wrong, gone, strings cut, replace you, right? So these guys have to have a narrative. They've made deals, back-end deals with lots of different people to get in. So they have to uphold those deals, and if they don't, they get booted and someone else comes in to push those agendas through. If we look at some of those policies, especially that 40% home ownership scheme, which is, they'll own half of your house, right? 40% of your house. You'll own nothing and be happy. That's what that Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum said, right? These guys, universal healthcare, right? World Health Organization, right? These are comments that are sort of coming out, which are through the narrative of the greater global field. I find it interesting that we've got, normally when a Prime Minister comes in, like you guys probably remember, when old elections have come through, it's normally like, they get voted in May, and then in July, someone will start being sworn in via the whoever swears them in to be the Prime Minister. I find it interesting that we've heard all about this stuff on the news. It was the 21st of May, and then on the 22nd of May, there was an act that was signed, right? And ScoMo had avoided the question. He just said, he actually said, I support the World Health Organization, I'll sign whatever they tell me to sign. There was an act being signed on the 22nd of May, which was the day after the election, which would give special powers to the World Health Organization to be able to come into our country, and each country that's signing onto this treaty to come and have control over the government. The government has to step aside, right? This was being enacted. No one talked about it in the news. I never heard about this, right? But you go digging and it's actually, there's these meetings that are happening. You've got Davos, which is, go and research that. You've got this Tokyo, Japan, whatever it is, that meeting that's happening on the 22nd, which is today or 23rd that's happening. 23rd, 24th, which is where the India, US, Biden, Albanese is already in that meeting, right? He's at work today. Why is he at work? Why is his agendas like very, it's like Scott Morrison's gone like, fuck it, I'm moving out, this is going to blow, right? I'm going to, someone's asking me to sign some shit that's not on my clock. So it's like, it's very interesting that things have moved so fast. If you ask me.
Do we have a choice to sign that? Okay.
Well, if you're not
Probably
there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're not there, right? But the thing is that like all these things are being enacted. Like we've got a selection here, right? We say no election. Everyone thinks it's an election, right? Like we didn't say I want this guy, right? I want Pat to be my prime minister, right? No one had that option, right? We had a selection. Do you want to have the Liberal guy or do you want to have the Labor guy, right? Who funds it? Who are their political funders? Who are their sponsors? Who's the ones deriving all this money? Who printed the balance sheet and said, look, if you get in, I'll give you $1 trillion to go and spend money doing this. You'll be the biggest gangster ever. You can go collect your pension later. These guys are placed there. If they say something out of line, they're gone. So do I think they're a puppet? 100% they're a puppet. Do I think this guy's a puppet for the New World Order? Let's just see what comes in, right? There's certainly a lot of smelly stuff that's coming from the fact that he's giving away ownership that's co-owned via the government, who owns that package, right? The thing I'd like to know is it actually the government that owns that 40%, or is that packaged up as a product and sold into some sort of financial instrument, right? What's happened to the mortgages, right? What happened in the GFC with the collateralized mortgages, right? So who's funding all of this stuff? Time will tell.
Could you not argue that 40% aren't they supposed to be the party for the working man?
Yeah.
Wouldn't they just package it up as we're helping?
Well, that's what they package up. You won the election, right?
No, but I mean, what makes you think that it's not just...
He's a good guy.
No, that's just a party that is there for the working man to help.
Okay. So let's just look at it. The question I would ask is, firstly, apart from you've got the new government in, they might need 500 staff or something like that to run the government. But all the people that were already there, do you have a new health minister? Do we have new health? Who runs the army? Who runs defence? Who runs the central bank? All those people are still there. I've never seen the central bank guy come up, but where's the money come from? If the Labor Party wants to go and enact any of these things, where do they get the money from? They obviously don't have the money because they had to go and borrow $1 trillion in the last 2 years. Who did they borrow the money from? Because if I go borrow money from the toughest guy on the block, he's the fucking tough guy on the block. I'm a little bitch, right? So the government's a bitch to who? Who do they owe the money to? Is it someone putting the money in their pocket, or is it a loan? It's the central banks. So if we look at all this funding, where's the funding coming from? They might go, we're going to increase cigarette taxes. We're going to increase, the guys that are earning 100 grand income and tax them a lot more. Well, they can try, but that's not going to make all that money. Those people are going to be broke and they're not going to have enough income in the future. It's not going to come from there. It's got to come from somewhere.
Do you believe that either party is the objective's the same?
I think their hands are tied. They're doing what they're told. Yeah. Well, as I said, the Liberal Party is a very conservative party, and they just had the biggest socialist program ever by putting $1 trillion worth of money in the last 2 years. So, settling for the rich. So, any other questions?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Guess I'll leave it over to everyone else. What do you think is going to happen with the Labor Party? What questions do you have for us to look at and to answer for you? If you do have any questions, flick them in the comment box below and we'll have a chat then. Have a great day. Bye for now.